Good. Quick question. How many of you are part of software development teams? Thank you. How many of you use source control? Are there anybody who doesn't use source control? So there are a few teams which still don't use source control. Small teams, 2-3 member kind of a teams, and we come back and say, no, source control is probably not very important. We open up Visual Studio, start up a project, write code, get it to work, and we're very happy. One of the things that I talk about is team development, right? And there are 2-3 things important as part of a team development. One of the first most important things as part of team development is some kind of a source control method. What type of source control is not very important. We can debate that later, which is good, which is bad kind of stuff. But a source control environment is mandatory. General solution, even if you're a one-member team, even if you're coming back and just doing something on your own, even if you're doing a demo project or a project for an event like this, consider starting off from a source control kind of mechanism, right? Very useful, and I'll explain why it is useful as we go. Okay, so the moment we have a small team, we start off with the source control, right? How many of you actually, yeah, can you close the door please? It's a bit noisy outside. Once we have a source control, we come back, write code, we check it in, right? How do we then come back and release this to a test environment? We come back, compile, take the whole compilation, give it off to a test environment. How many of us build installers to be installed in the production environment? We come back and create some kind of installer kind of stuff sometimes. Web applications doesn't necessarily need an installer, right? You can sort of copy and sort of be done with it. The whole point of publishing from a dev environment to another environment is something that happens sort of ad hoc. Right? Visual Studio gives a publishing option, other tools also give a publishing kind of an option. We take that and we sort of end up deploying. The challenge is we are not sure which is the version that went out to testing. Right? There's a high chance that I made some change, sent it, I forgot to check it in. Now my source control is on a different version, I'm on a different version, testing on a different version, and I'm sure all of us have seen instances of this. Right? Decently large teams, mismatch of our versions is something that we face commonly. Right? One of the things that you should consider doing is to get away from that whole pipeline. Last sort of question before I begin the session. How many of you run a continuous integration environment? Those, right? Why do we run a continuous integration? What is the benefit of that? What is the downside?
Maintaining versions is beneficial because we have a lot of branches and a lot of projects going parallelly to one application. So in that kind of environment, it kind of becomes mandatory for us to do it.
Right. So one of the important things that sort of everyone is sort of targeting towards or moving towards is a continuous integration kind of environment. Continuous integration in some instances sounds slightly complex and big. It's not. There are multiple tools out there which can come back and help ease up the whole process. But continuous integration essentially is put something what we call as a pipeline in place. Right? It comes and says when you're working, it's like when you go to the airport, if everyone can go to different counters and randomly get to the airport, it becomes a mess. So what we do is we come back and say, okay, you do what you want, but there is one security pointer. Everyone must come through this. The moment you come through the security point, I know you're now a valid person who's going to travel. If you're not gone through the security point, I don't care who you are, you're outside. Right? So there is an outside the system, there is an inside the system. Very similarly, the reason we talk about this whole continuous integration pipeline is the pipeline should be developers develop, they check it into source control. There is a system outside of the development which picks up from the source code and builds it out. That is your gateway to everything that is going to get released. Right? So any mistake that happens, any wrong checking that happens will get caught at that time. Right? So you need a system which takes from source control, builds it. One of the things that we talk about along with continuous integration is continuous deployment as well. Right? Wherein we come back and say, no, don't just come back and do a build, which is a compile, but come back and do a deployment to a staging area, test it out. That becomes your gateway to all the things that you want to check as part of your code. A lot of things that we introduce as part of that. One, we introduce the concept of code analysis, static code analysis, like style cop, fx cop, resharper, etc. So you can come back and say, I take from the source control version, I run through static code analysis, I run through all the automated unit tests, I run through any other analysis that I want to do, I come back and do a complete verification, and that is the build that goes out, right? So it is ideal to come back and have an integrated pipeline in terms of the kind of work that you're coming back and doing, right? Very useful, small or large teams, a 10-form project to a 1,000-form project. It should be the same process pretty much across the board, right? As part of this session, what we'll talk about is how do we come back and do this kind of an integrated pipeline? How do we come back and do a team development as part of a cloud setup, right? So that's the focus in terms of this session. Quick introduction to myself. My name is Praveen Srivatsa. I play the role of a director at a company called Azure. Play the role of a Microsoft Regional Director. I've been speaking at sessions for around 10-12 years, old timer in terms of being speaking at conferences and stuff. We have an e-learning product which is on the cloud, and this is the process that we use as part of that build, development, deployment kind of stuff. And as part of the e-learning product, we come back and help companies in terms of learning technologies. What this session is about, quick introduction to team development, a demo of Azure websites, how do we come back and develop as part of the cloud, and how do we do team development. How many of us look at cloud as a development environment? A lot of us come back and look at cloud in terms of it's a production environment, right? How many of us use the cloud as a development environment? Was that any specific reason you're using that, or what is the scenario that you work in terms of development on the cloud? Basically testing, right? In fact, in one of the slides that come up, I will show it to you that development and testing is the largest scenario in terms of what Microsoft is seeing adoption of the cloud. Right? So even though it started off in terms of saying you'll save a lot of money as part of your data centers rarely move to cloud. Right? One of the first steps that people are taking is they're moving their development and testing environments onto the cloud. In my previous session, I was giving an example. We wanted to do a performance testing for a customer. Right? We wanted to have a setup which had 4 to 6 servers kind of a stuff, 100 GB kind of a data setup, 25,000 concurrent users, and we wanted to sort of do a complete stress testing of the environment. Right? When we attempted to set up that by ourselves, it took us a month and a half to set it up, along with permissions for the machines, getting machines, all that crap. Right? When we came back and set it up in the cloud, it took us a day and a half. Right? In a day and a half, we could spin up multiple machines on the cloud, good amount of RAM, do the entire performance testing, spin it down, spend only for a week, and you're done with the entire exercise. Right? So testing, functional testing, performance testing, stress testing, all of these different environment testing, all of this, the cloud is an ideal environment for us to come back and start working with these things. Okay? Dev, test, run apps, that is one of the primary workload. Right? Dev and test is the number one workload. It's cost effective. You pay per minute. So you can come back and spin up what you want. Once you're done, you can sort of spin it down. So you don't have to pay too much. You can use it for a build server, you can use it for a test server, you can use it for a dev server also. Right? In my last session, we talked about how you can directly do development of the cloud, of Visual Studio Monaco or hosted virtual machine kind of thing. Right? You can also use it for dev, but you can also use it for a team environment kind of a setup. Let me quickly switch across. Log into my Azure. I'll take a simple example. I'll take the example of a website. Right? Assuming we are developing a website, the same is true for web services or it's true for any of the other pieces. But from a demo perspective, I'll take an example of a website. One of the things Azure allows across virtual machines, website, web services, jobs, etc. is it gives you the option to deploy this application from source control. Right? So rather than coming back and saying I'll manually deploy, rather than coming back and saying I will do some manual work around this whole stuff, I can configure it to get deployed from source control. It has a few intelligent hooks. For example, in TFS or in Git, I can come back and say deploy on every build, or I can say deploy on every major version. Right? Which means if I'm on version 1, Version 1, 1.1, 1.2, nothing happens. The moment I update version to 2, it will automatically come back and do a deployment into the cloud container. Right? So I can set up rules which essentially tell me that come back and do a deployment at a logical point. Let me create a new. So one of the options you get is publish from source control, right? So at any point of time, you can hook it up to source control. You can say, I want to publish it from source control. You can give credentials of a source control, and you can come back and say, that's what I want to deploy, right? Two ways to do that. You can either do the deployment from here, or you can do the deployment from your source control system, right? So you can either push it, or you can pull it from here. I will push it from there. One thing I can do is I can choose to come back and say this website I want to edit in Visual Studio. So I'm configuring it to be editable in Visual Studio. Right now there's a blank website. What Azure does is it puts a blank HTML file, sort of under construction kind of a stuff. But other than that, there's nothing else as part of this setup right now. Okay. It gives you FTP details and stuff. So if you want to manually publish it, that's how you go. But I will go ahead and open it up in Visual Studio. So this version of Visual Studio is an online hosted version of Visual Studio. We call it Visual Studio Monaco. It's an online editor. You can do the entire development of the cloud. Okay. So we showed in the last session how you can just use this without even having a Visual Studio installation. So you can do full-fledged editing and stuff. HTML, CSS, you can come back and edit C#, PHP, Python, Node.js. You can pretty much come back and use it as a full-fledged code editor. Now in this case, what I'll do is I will look at the Git part, the source control part, right? So I come back and say I want to use Git. I want to connect to Visual Studio Online, right? I have a Visual Studio Online account. I authorize it. Like repository. I want to create a distributed working environment. And it uses the same protocol as what Git does, right? Which means you can come back and use all the Git tools against TFS as well, right? When I connect, it shows me a project here. So let me quickly connect to Visual Studio Online. Microsoft is hosted visualstudio.com. Visualstudio.com is the equivalent of Visual Studio Online. Visual Studio Online, the name is slightly funny in the sense that there are multiple parts to it. I showed off Visual Studio. Everyone understands Visual Studio as an IDE, right? I showed off the online IDE. But Visual Studio Online is essentially TFS Online. It's not just the Visual Studio IDE, it is a complete TFS Online. So when I come back and sign into Visual Studio Online, it tells this is my account, and what I essentially get is I get a hosted TFS in the cloud, right? TFS, like for what all of you guys know, it's not just a source control system, right? It's a place when I can sort of do complete project management. So I can come back and say, this is my project, these are my task list items, these are all my code repositories, this is my team, work is allocated to my team, what is the burn down that I want to track. I can come back and do my complete ALM, application lifecycle management, right, in terms of tracking of my project status online. And source control is one piece of that whole stuff, right? So when I come back and register an account for Visual Studio Online, I get a complete hosted TFS account. So as part of this, I can come back and say, I want to create a new repository. I want to give a name, Git demo. I can choose a process template. Do I want Visual Studio Scrum, Agile Software Development, CMM, Process Improvement? For those of you who are familiar with TFS, you are given a set of templates, but you can also create your own process templates. For example, you can come back and say that a code review is mandatory. Without that, I will not allow check-in. Right? You can come back and say a code analysis is mandatory. Without a code analysis, I will not allow it to be checked. Without 80% code coverage in terms of automated test, it will not accept it as in terms of release to staging. The build will fail. Right? So these are internal rules. You can also come back and say, I want an iterative development, I want a fixed development, I want a part iterative, part fixed development. So you can sort of create your own process templates, the way you want your thing to work. A few templates are given out of the box. Right? So you pick one of these templates, and below that, as part of version control, if you notice, you will see Team Foundation as well as Git. Right? So you can actually choose. Any question?
You're creating a code repository, or you're creating just a project which is following a certain method?
We are creating so in TFS you create a project, and source control is one piece of the project. Right? So you always
a project, you're selecting which type of report.
Exactly, right? So in Team Foundation server, think of it more like a Jira kind of a stuff. When you come back and say, I want to create a project, that project has a process, it has milestones, it has burn down, it has team, and one of the components of that is source control. Right? So that's the way it gets done. So I also come back and choose what is my source control, Team Foundation or Git, and I can come back and say, create this project. Okay. It takes a while, comes back and creates the whole project. So this is something that is free for teams of up to 5 people. This is something that is free in the initial stages. Yeah, so even now, if you go back and register for a small team, you can get this entire source control of project completely free for small teams kind of a stuff. Which is why I encourage you. If you're small, you're not using version control, you're not doing anything like that, please use it. You get the whole environment wherein you can come back and start tracking your project, right? So when you navigate the project, you get work, code, build, test. You can come back and say, this is a sample sprint, these are the team rooms, people I work with, etc. Work is essentially your project planning, right? You can come back and say, as part of this, I have a backlog, I have a board, I want to define different kinds of requirements, requirement 1, it's a functional requirement, non-functional kind of a requirement, and I want to come back and add. For this, I want to add on details. So all your requirements management, the equivalent of a Jira kind of a stuff, all your requirement management, task management is something that you can come back and define. Because we chose the agile process template, it gives us a template where I can put everything into a backlog, and it gives me a burn down board. So I can come back and drag drop and assign it to users. I can say drag drop task to the current sprint, and I can say in this sprint pick up all of these items, right? And it sort of will measure a sprint burn down. Right? It will tell me what is the speed at which I am going, will I actually finish stuff or not. It tracks things. So it sort of gives me a complete project management dashboard. Okay? As part of this, I define multiple users. It's put requirement 1 against me. I can come back and say this is the active sprint. I can come back and say, there are some items in the proposed sprint. A regular agile project tracking is something I can come back and do.
Consider even the weekend as part of working, and the one now is not that as part of the sprint.
Correct.
Is that fixed in 2020?
I'm not sure it's fixed. I don't think it is fixed. It is a logical debate that we have gone through. The thought process being that if I have a weekend now, I will have a weekend even later. And there's this whole debate wherein some companies come back and say there are times wherein we also work over a weekend, so we would like it to be part of the burn down. Right? It is not configurable right now. Not that I know. Right? I know there's a huge debate around this. I know Microsoft is considering both parts of it, but I don't know if there's any change there. One of the things they have come back and said, as part of the process template, you can come back and configure things like you can create your own process template to change. Right?
Yes, but you can't configure the bottom.
Yeah, probably not. So even I'm not aware.
We had a problem in our team where the team went back and said that we are not going to work it.
Okay. Interesting. I didn't know about that. Right? But yeah, I know that there's a debate around that, and people are very strongly in favor of either side. Nobody's neutral. But I don't know the debate. Okay. Yes. So you can come back and schedule builds here as well. So you can come back and say, as part of this, I want to queue a build, right? You can set up a schedule which says every nightly queue a build, take all these items from that, and give you all the MS build configurations, and come back and run a build and deploy it into these environments, right? So running a nightly build is something that you can set up as part of this itself. Running an automated test is again something that you can set up as part of this, and you can configure it in terms of saying run the test, and as part of various, if items in the test, automated test fail, automatically raise it as a ticket. It will come into the backlog, so it becomes more work, and the team starts tracking through in terms of burn number. Right? So the entire ALM project management suite is what you get as part of Visual Studio Online. Up to 5 users is free. After it's more of a rented thing. Now, given the fact that I have a repository here, what I can do is I can now go back to my hosting environment. I can choose all my Git repositories. Right? So it does not allow me to choose other repositories right now. I can choose all my Git repositories, and I can say I want to come back and clone from that. Right? 2-3 things I need to do. I need to initialize the Git repository. Okay. It asks me to configure my user ID and password, or user ID to begin with. Studio Online Git repository. We'll just close the door. It need not be a Visual Studio Online repository. You can also create a repository in GitHub, which is extremely popular, and you can come back and say any Git repository. I will now take that, connect it here, and use this as a place where I will get from there, do my builds, etc., deploy it here, and use this as a testing unit. It can be TFS. It can be TFS or Git. Right? So we don't support SVN and Mercurial, etc., but we support TFS and Git. Right. With Git, we support both. We support a pull as well as a push. With TFS, we support only a push.
Now, let's say our teams are in US and India. What will be the performance of the cloud-based server?
So it's all in the cloud, right? So when you say performance of what? Because if it's a performance of
how would be the experience?
Okay, so
the internet backbone in India.
Right. So 2 different things there. When I come back and do a Git is anyway distributed. So everything is happening behind the scenes, right? So my check-in, check-out, my commit, etc. is something that I'm not too bothered about. The rest of the performance, it doesn't matter in the sense that I'm taking from Git and deploying to the cloud. My people just connect to the cloud to run a test. I can come back and automate the test as well, which is all running in the cloud, right? So there is no network latency that comes in.
From the perspective that, let's say, I want the whole dev environment on the cloud, like my Visual Studio is also on the cloud.
Right.
In that case, how is it?
Okay. Not so great, right? In the sense that there are limitations, but it is equivalent to if you have your servers hosted in the US and somebody is doing a remote desktop from here, right? It is equivalent or better than that, right? So in that sense, a lot of people are actually choosing to. Right? So give me a minute, I'll come to that whole virtual machine setup kind of a stuff in terms of the performance. Thought process again, create some kind of a source control repository, TFS or Git, come back and say, whatever work I do, whether I use Visual Studio desktop installed or I use Visual Studio Online, I come back and commit everything to that. You get a Visual Studio Online account, which is free for 5 users, and after that it's paid on a per user kind of basis. One thing that a lot of people don't realize is if you already have MSDN subscription, then MSDN subscription automatically includes a license for the Visual Studio Online as well, right? So you can essentially reuse your MSDN license there. Most importantly, set up this entire repository wherein it will do a nightly build, it will do a nightly test, and it will come back and do a deployment. One of the things that you get as part of the Azure websites is you get a staging environment, right? So whenever you come back and look at Azure environment, notice you have a new deployment slot, right? A deployment slot is you come back and say, I want to deploy in production, right? You can come back and say, I don't always want to deploy into production. I want to deploy into different slots, right? I can create a staging slot, I can create a development slot, I can create a test slot, and I can come back and say, when you take from source control, automatically deploy to one of these. So essentially what I can do is I can set up a nightly build in Visual Studio Online which says take from a Git or a TFS, do the entire build, run through all the automated tests, come back and put it up into a staging environment as part of my Azure website or as part of my Azure environment. Right? The entire process will happen automatically behind the scenes for you. Your test team just needs to come in and see if they want to check around, look through, do a demo, etc. Right? So the entire process can be automated and it's something that you can set up as a pipeline on the cloud. Any quick questions? Right? Given this kind of environment, what you should look at doing is look at the resharper rules, is checking for a whole bunch of rules, checking for all the tests, etc. Coming back, deploying and ensuring it is ready at the earliest. Right? So from the time you finish code to the time it is ready, all that stuff is something that can be done as part of a cloud environment. You can configure, you can't configure resharper here as part of this hosted MS build, you can configure FX. Right? Now, one of the things that happen, your environment as part of a virtual machine, upload it onto the cloud and come back and say as part of TFS, deploy onto that. Right? So you have all options. You can either work with on-premise, which is in your company kind of a data, or you can work with the source control in the cloud. Either one of these options, you can come back and say, I will deploy from there onto a local environment, from there onto the cloud. The key rule is try to avoid latency. The entire concept of latency is, if you have your source control in-house and you are deployed to the cloud, there is a large amount of data transfer that you do. Right? If you have your source control in the cloud and you're deploying to a local setup, there again is a large amount of data transfer that's happening. Right? So the typical general convention is, anytime you have a latency, choose to put that into a process which does say once in 2 weeks or once in a month kind of a stuff. Right? For a nightly or a regularized build, come back and have both the environments, which is your source control as well as your environment where you're deploying, close to each other.
What is the advantage if I run the build from the cloud but still have my source control?
So what it will have to do is it will have to transfer all data from your local source control to the cloud. It will have to transfer the data over the network. So it adds on a network latency.
Okay, so it will bring the code
onto the cloud.
onto the backend.
Build everything and then do the
You
deployment.
can't configure it this way, that from the cloud it gives a command to build it.
Correct, but in which case then you're doing the build locally. In which case you already have a local TFS, in which case you'd rather just do it locally. You don't need the cloud.
Then you need
Don't need the
that's
cloud.
Right.
Right. So if you're coming back and keeping it close here, then you don't need it at all. But then the point is, if you want to test it, you need the entire test environment here. If your test environment is in the cloud, then you have a latency in terms of deploying it. Right? So the general rule of thumb is pick one of two high-level options. Sort of either do everything in your data center or sort of move to the cloud. Right? Microsoft belief is that over a period of time, we will gradually move on to the cloud. Right? And we will come back and deploy it onto the data centers, finally in production. But other than that, we sort of will move everything onto the cloud. Right? So Azure network infrastructure and all the rest is sort of taken care of. Right? There is a city called Lavasa near Mumbai. Right? It's a city which has come back and chosen to run its entire infrastructure on the cloud. Right? So when they have a hospital staff, they come back and say, to commission this entire hospital in terms of IT infrastructure, it takes them a day and a half. Right? So everyone across the city, every organization, every corporate, every industry, every department there, including government departments, etc., run their IT completely off the cloud. Right? So as a city, they have chosen to come back and say, we will put a fiber optic network across the city, but we will not invest in terms of infrastructure, in terms of data centers, servers, machines and stuff at all. Right? So it's a sort of either or kind of investment. Right? You come back and say, instead of investing in machines, we'd rather invest on the network and let everything else run off the cloud in terms of what we want to do. Microsoft gives you a set of solutions across Visual Studio Online. Not just a source control, not just a machine kind of a stuff, it gives you the complete ALM platform, application lifecycle management platform. Right? Like I showed you, you can start off in terms of creating a project online, you can manage the tasks and the requirements online, you can come back and use it as a source control repository, checking your code, Your code, you can use online editor, you can use Visual Studio, you can use Visual Studio in the cloud, in a virtual machine, or you can use any other tools like Eclipse, etc. Right? All of them have got providers to TFS, and you can pick any one of them and come back and check it into TFS.
Visual Studio
We run as part of the virtual machine. Right? Last comment there. Multiple US-based companies have come back and said, when I want to scale my development environment, I outsource my development to somebody, some service company in India. I choose to start with say 5 developers. I scale it up to 30, for some immediate requirement. I scale it down to 10, then I scale it up to 60. It makes a lot of sense to have an image when I can right click and say generate machine for developer, right? And I'm done. I'm ready for the developer, right? Today, when I want to onboard a developer, other than his learning and stuff, setting up the machine, setting up the environment, creating that whole stuff itself takes anywhere from 2 weeks to a month and a half, right? So their point, and plus from an IP perspective, all of that is something they own. Their admin logs on, their admin manages it, it's all in the cloud. There is no code that they're handing over to a company here in India, right? So they're very comfortable with coming back and running all of these in the cloud. Small additional note there. Remember that whatever we do in the cloud is geospatially replicated, right? So when I create a virtual machine, I can come back and say create it in US or create it in India, right? You have the option of coming back and saying create this machine in the US but replicate it to India, right? So I can have India developers working off the South Asia center. I can have US developers working off the US center. I can have Europe developers working off the Europe center, right? So it sort of reduces latency for each one, right? And that is something that's built into the cloud. How does that say? That is a feature of Azure. So Azure comes back and says at a low level, byte stream level, if you come back and give me data on one other platform, I will come back and replicate it. Just one bit of technical information there. Whenever you take a machine on Azure, you get 3 virtual machines. It internally does a sync, but in the same geography, right? So for example, if you come back and say South Asia, give me a machine, you will get in South Asia 3 machines, okay? 2 on the same rack, 1 on a different rack. That way if the power goes out, at least one of them is still blinking, right? So, and this is a sort of industry standard. Amazon does this, Google does this, all of them do this, right? So internally, they have to put the process of replicating across 3 machines anyways, right? And for that, you're not charged separately. When you come back and say, I do another geography, they take the same logic and extend it to another 3 machines in another geography, right? But the replication process is inbuilt.
So the question was something interesting. Let's say you are in the Europe time zone. There is a good overlap between the days.
What is called as a monitoring and diagnostic services. So you, as part of the testing, you can come back and say, I want to run this in a staging environment, but now I want you to collect all statistics around it. I want you to monitor CPU utilization. I want you to monitor hard disk utilization. I want you to monitor, RAM utilization. What are the locks occurring? What are the deadlocks occurring? I want you to give me a complete monitoring dashboard. Okay? I can give you a graph in terms of how all of these are behaving on a regularized timeline kind of perspective. Right? So you can also do a health monitoring from performance and health perspective as part of these virtual machines, and that is inbuilt into the same infrastructure. Okay? All of these are available as part of the Visual Studio Cloud services, and you can come back and use this along with integration with your local environment. I'll show you a setup. So that essentially is what we call as Visual Studio Online. Right? Like I said, the name is slightly misleading. It's not necessarily just the IDE. It is TFS, Visual Studio with TFS completely online. Okay, few things in terms of what it does. It helps you in terms of leveraging your existing investments, right? So if you want to integrate your existing IT investments onto that, you can come back and, like I told you, create a network between the cloud and your local machine, and you can treat both of them as part of one single domain, right? So whether the data is there or here, other than a little bit of a latency issue, you can come back and treat them as part of one single group. If you have a heterogeneous landscape, which is some Windows machine, some older Windows machine, some Linux machines, etc., you can come back and deploy those also as part of the virtual machines. And if you've got concerns from a security compliance perspective, the Azure cloud has been certified for HIPAA compliance. It has been certified for other compliance regulators. Even with all of that, people are still skeptical from a production perspective, but from a development and staging kind of a perspective, there are no concerns at all. Right? So, which is why a lot of people are moving on from a development staging kind of perspective. They are very open to putting it. Note of caution: if you are putting data which is sensitive, right? things that contain social security number, things that contain people's health related data, etc. Be careful in terms of putting it onto the cloud. That's a generic information irrespective of what cloud you use. Right? But other than that, you should know the challenges. A lot of tools and utilities are there which do what we call as a obfuscation. Right? So for example, you can come back and give a database and say in this database, this columns, please obfuscate. Right? What it does is, for example, if it has a social security number, it will go through all the data, do the equivalent of encryption of all of that, just randomize it and come back and create similar IDs which are invalid, right? For a testing kind of purpose. Right? So you can use a whole bunch of obfuscation tools when you're putting all of that kind of data on the cloud. From a BS online kind of a perspective, you have integration heterogeneous security, which is more of a marketing kind of a slide. It says you get all this stuff. Primary thought process is you have a choice between the PaaS services, which is Visual Studio Online, and a virtual machine. Right? A lot of people are comfortable with virtual machines because it's very similar to the way they are working today. Right? So they come back and say full machine, reshuffle, everything, lock, stock, and barrel, I can move on to the cloud. But also keep in mind that the PaaS services, which is the cloud-based services, are 1/10 the cost of a virtual machine. Right? So one of the primary reasons why people would go with the Visual Studio Online is if those features are good enough, then you're, in terms of a cost, it will be like less than 1/10 of coming back and spinning up a complete virtual machine. Keep in mind, when you spin up a virtual machine, you're paying for the hardware, the actual RAM, hard disk space, etc. You're paying rental for the Windows license, you're paying rental for the TFS license, so all of those license costs add up, right? So you end up spending a decent amount when you're having TFS as part of the cloud. It's still easier because it's a rental model as compared to having to buy it off, right? It's still cheaper than that, but when you come to Visual Studio Online, all those additional overheads are not there. Everything is being normalized for you, and you get 1/10 the cost in terms of directly using it as an online. Creating images is very easy. You can come back and pick any image from image gallery. We have a whole host of machines. What you can also do is you can bring what we call as your custom PhD. This is a scenario wherein we do a lot of testing. We have a specific test environment, right? It's a test environment configured with a specific version of .NET, specific version of PHP. It has a certain data setup. It's configured correctly the way we want it, right? What you can do is we have a bunch of tools for P2B and B2P, physical to virtual and virtual to physical, right? So you can come back and say, this is a physical machine, create a virtual machine out of this, P2B. Upload it, and so you get a replica 100% the same as what you had on your on-premise machine, right? It's a complete automated process, bunch of tools which comes back and do that, and you essentially come back and transfer, right? All of this is what we call as virtual machine portability, right? Any virtual machine that runs on Hyper-V here, you can take the PHP, directly put it on there. So sort of showed a diagram. So across all of this, you can take a virtual machine there, pull it out and use it locally. You can take a virtual machine here and put it up there. So even if you create a virtual machine in the cloud, which you're using for development purpose, and then decide download the virtual machine, spin it up Hyper-V, it now becomes a local development, right? One of the things not many people are aware of is Microsoft has come back and open source the whole Azure platform, right? Which means that other vendors can now install and allow Azure. As an example, GoDaddy doesn't do this, but as an example, GoDaddy can now come back and say, we will host Azure machines, right? Which means you can take the virtual machine from Windows Azure, you can go to GoDaddy, upload it, and get started, right? So if you want to move across different vendors, it guarantees you a virtual machine portal, and that is built into the whole licensing structure. This is something that is very useful for providers like telecom providers, right? So Airtel, if for example India comes back and says we have some legal issues because of some data has to be in India, you can now come back and say Airtel will now provide these services. You take the virtual machine from there, host it as part of Airtel, and the whole thing will continue to work, right? And there's no downside to this.
This works for even if I want to do a private cloud.
This works even if you want to do a private cloud. There are multiple instances where people have come back and from legal kind of a perspective, I need it to be in a private cloud. What Microsoft has done is they've taken the entire Azure platform itself as an open source. They have a partnership agreement with them. They say you take it off, every upgrade we give it to you, but you go ahead and host a complete private cloud. Right? So that's also completely possible.
And the costing for that is?
Costing for that will be discussed with them. Right? So they come back and say as part of a partnership, we'll discuss the costing. The platform per se is open source. So they come back and say for the platform, for setting up a private cloud, we will not charge you, right? But their monitoring tools in terms of the Windows servers you're running and stuff, that is something they come back and discuss, right? So obviously all the rest of the hardware and stuff is yours, right? So they only need to have an agreement saying they will monitor and have an agreement for all Microsoft licenses that you're using. If you come back and choose to have Azure as a private cloud with non-Microsoft environments, then you're completely on your own, right? That's the thought process. So the thought process there is deploy anywhere with no lock-in. A lot of people come back and say IP, like intellectual property. I am building a product, my source code is available somewhere. If I get into an intellectual property discussion, if it becomes a court case, right, then you need to know who owns this code, right? So Microsoft very clearly comes back and says, even though it's on the cloud, you can pull out the virtual machine, take it independently, deploy it on the local machine, and you completely take the lead, right? So it gives you a guarantee that you can deploy with no lock-in at all as part of that structure. Right. Windows Azure IaaS, it's something that gives you this environment wherein you can set up a machine in the cloud. It gives you a virtual network wherein you can participate as part of a local network. What happens when you participate as part of a local network is, as an example, if you've got a company, abc.com, right? You create a machine in the cloud, you now come back and say it is part of abc.com domain. Now it is no longer part of the Azure domain. So your geo replication and stuff will stop working. Right? Because Azure can no longer look into that. It is now treated as a machine which is part of your domain. Your IT administrator is the only person who has got access to it. Nobody else gets access to it, and it participates as part of your corporate domain. You can now do / machine name and access that with a little bit of a latency, but you can access it directly. Right? So it's part of your internal firewall and not part of the external network. Right? So you can come back and take all the Azure virtual machines and make it participate as part of your internal network. One of the things they've recently done, as early as 2 weeks ago, is they've come back and given a point-to-point fiber optic network option. Right? It is available only in the US now, but they're rolling it across multiple places in the world. A corporate can come back and choose that I want a low latency connection between my data center and Azure data center. Right? So it sort of ensures that the latency becomes negligible in terms of work. That is that whole VPN. So by default, it had a VPN kind of a connection. It had a point-to-point, it had a point-to-site kind of a connection. But now they have taken it further, and this has been upgraded to come back and say this. They give you a fiber optic kind of a connection between your data center and their data center in the US to begin with, which they will roll out in other places. All of this stuff that we talked about as part of Visual Studio Online, Azure, as well as virtual machines, is something that can be automated with PowerShell. Right? PowerShell is a bunch of programs, Unix shell scripting kind of a programs. Whole bunch of them as templates are already available. So you can go to technet.microsoft.com, download all of this PowerShell sample scripts, customize it the way you want. Thought process being that people can put up their own admin tools based on which all of this stuff is run on the back. The only limitation factor, which is why you need PowerShell for things like this, is it has an impact on costing. So for example, you run a PowerShell which comes back and creates 5 different machines. Somebody is agreeing to pay for those 5 machines. Right? So the only requirement they have is, as part of this PowerShell deployment, first we will give you a certificate. That certificate authorizes the user of the PowerShell to participate on behalf of the admin. Right? And comes back and says, any command I run, if it has a cost implication, I'm willing to bear it. Given that, you can come back and do the complete administration as part of the PowerShell. Quick thought process is, when you come back and create all of these environments in the cloud, you can come back and have a collaboration environment in the cloud. Few things that Microsoft is doing, not sure how many of you are familiar with Office Online, right? If you use Hotmail, etc., OneDrive, SkyDrive, etc., which is renamed to OneDrive. The moment you go there, you actually see Office Online, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, everything is now available online. Right? So Microsoft is going through this process, and those have features like, if you're editing a document, it comes and tells you there are 2 other users. Online you can do edits, online you can come back and share comments and stuff. They are bringing in all those features to Visual Studio as well. Right? So online edit, collaboration, commenting, what we call as a collaborative edit, wherein you can do a code review of a code that you're working on. All of that is something they're looking at bringing into Visual Studio Online as well. Right? Multiple environments, provision, develop, deploy, manage. These are the stages that you typically go through. You have multiple environments. Like I showed you, you can create different environments or different virtual machines. You can choose to say from my source control, deploy it into one of these environments. Once I test, once I'm done, etc., I will now provision and move it into the other end. Right? One of the guarantees that Azure gives you is movement across environments is seamless. So even though your staging environment connects to a different database, it tells you that when you move from staging to production, there is no other configuration change that will happen. So as an example, if your production and staging databases are of different versions, in the staging it will fail saying the production database is different, it does not make sense for you to test it, please sync it up before continuing it. And once you test it in staging, I guarantee you it will work in production. Right? So movement across these different environments is something they guarantee, saying it will be fail safe. So if you are comfortable in one of these environments, then pretty much sure it's only a logistic issue in terms of moving to the other. Quick thought process in terms of how customers typically set up this environment. Right? You have an on-premise environment, which is what you're working with today. Right? So today you've got a bunch of local servers, you've got a dev test. You can do your entire project planning, backlog planning, agile process planning, waterfall methodology planning, etc. You can come back and do all of that stuff. You can do task assignments to users, sprint burn down, etc. You can check all of that stuff. Okay. You can come back and do a build online. You can come back and have a daily build. You can have an hourly build. You can have a queued build. All of that stuff you can have online. You can have the entire set of testing tools. Right? On top of all of that, you can come back and provision test servers and staging servers, irrespective of the underlying operating system platform. Windows, Linux, Unix. You can choose to either have simple websites and applications in Azure, or you can choose to spin up your own complete virtual machine. Right? And you can come back and deploy and test across all of this stuff. Right? You can also move your on-premise environments to the cloud, or connect the two to extend your data centers onto the cloud. So a lot of things in the cloud is not, this is the way to do stuff. It's more like, these are options. You need to pick what you want to do. Right? Thought process from Microsoft's perspective is 3 to 5 years down the line, we expect that most of this will be on the cloud. Right? The question is in what stages that you will go. Right? So internal thought process very clear. Down the line, we expect that most of the work will only happen on the cloud. You will not have any further questions in terms of which is the better way to do. Right? But there's an inflection point. Now people are comfortable with on-premise and they're exploring the cloud. Right? Pretty soon they'll get comfortable with both, and beyond that the inflection point will be everything will happen in the cloud with a few instances of people working on this. Right? So very clearly that is the shift here, right? Especially from a team development kind of perspective. Quick questions, thoughts? You will do the production deployment again, right? So remember that, if I understood you right, I keep making changes and I want to come back and see the impact of these changes, right?
It's kind of a static data, something.
Okay. Correct. Process remains exactly the same. So even today, if you change your static data, you would be checking into source control. You have a build process which takes it up and does that rolling change. So it's an incremental change kind of a stuff. It would follow exactly the same process. Right? So the only question is, would you want to have your source control locally and deploy there, or do you want to have the source control there itself and let you do a nightly job? How you want to structure it, that's a choice. Right? But other than that, the process does not change much. Right? So quick thought process, walk away with an assumption that you would like to have your entire development environment on the cloud. Come back and check what are the limitations today, what you'll have to live with, and what are the pains today. But start with an assumption that 3 years down the line, you essentially will have a complete environment in it. Okay? An example I was giving in my last session, I know of a company here in Bangalore, it's a 25-member company, 27-member company. They don't have desktop machines at all. In fact, they don't even have an office. They rent out a place wherein they meet for a meeting room, right? Wherein they meet once in a while. They've got 18 machines in the cloud as part of the dev environment, right? It includes dev servers, it includes staging, performance testing servers, it includes production servers, right? Entire office in terms of infrastructure is in the cloud. And people are allowed to work off tablets, off machines, off anything. You bring your own device, right? Thought process is you check mails, you do YouTube, you do Facebook, that's what you do on your device, right? All the rest of the dev environment happens on the cloud. Right? So you can use a Mac, you can use a Linux box, you can use a Windows box, you don't care. Everything happens in the cloud. Right? So just from an infrastructure setup kind of a perspective, as long as you're in a good network, that is the only dependency you have. Right? So I would rather give a person a decent machine with a good network using which he can work off the cloud. Right? It will become impractical for us to give somebody enough SharePoint environments, dev environment. SharePoint environment, minimum is 12 GB of RAM and practical is 18 GB of RAM. So I have a dev team of 20 people, 18 GB of RAM, 20 people is impossible. It is just painful to maintain. On the cloud, it is a click to set it up. Right? So obviously there's a cost involved, but I spin it down. I use it for an hour, I use it for 2 hours, and I spin it down. Right? So there are a lot of new scenarios that are being opened up as part of moving the entire team onto the cloud. Right? So ask yourself the question in terms of saying, how soon can I do it and when will I do it, rather than should I do it. Right?